June 1st, 1898. 2 miles off the lee shore of Santa Catalina Island, a man in a wooden skiff is being pulled through the Pacific by something he cannot see. The line in his hands hums with impossible weight, and it does not stop. His name is Charles Frederick Holder. He is 46 years old, a naturalist by training and a writer by trade, and he was never supposed to reach this water at all. A disease had tried to stop him, so he had been planning to go to Mexico. He had field notes, scientific contacts in the region, and a clear purpose. A lung condition changed his route, and what grew from that detour changed American sport fishing forever. Right now, in the June light off Santa Catalina Island, none of that history matters. The fish is still running. The skiff lurches forward. What is on that line has never been landed on rod and reel before. So to understand how Charles Frederick Holder ended up in that skiff, you have to go back to Lynn, Massachusetts, where he was born in 1851, into a family that treated the natural world as a serious obligation. His father, Dr. Joseph Holder, was curator of invertebrate zoology at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Charles grew up beside him in museum halls, on tidal flats, reading Water and Bone. By his 20s, young Charles had his own desk at the museum and an eye toward the wider continent. Mexico was on his list. Its coasts, its deep river mouths, the undocumented life beneath its warm Pacific shallows. Then came the cough. In the early 1880s, consumption, the White Plague, was killing 1 in 7 Americans. His doctors were direct. He needed dry, warm air, and New York was slowly becoming his grave. Mexico would wait. In 1885, and Holder and his wife Sarah packed what he could carry and headed west, not toward the tropics he had mapped, but toward a small city of orange groves and dry mountain air, Pasadena, California. His lungs cleared. He began writing again, teaching at Throop College, co-founding what would become the Tournament of Roses. But a naturalist without water is still looking, and Holder kept his eyes on the Pacific horizon. 22 miles offshore, beyond the haze of the Los Angeles basin, an island rose from the Pacific, Santa Catalina. He first wrote about its waters in 1891, describing black sea bass that nobody back east would believe. What he found on the water outraged him. Local fishermen worked heavy handlines, hauling tuna by the dozens with no skill required and no mercy given. He hired a boatman known only as Mexican Joe and spent 2 years learning the current. If you want to see how Holder's rod and reel theory holds against a 183-pound Pacific tuna, here's what I ask. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying this reached you. Hit subscribe if this resonated, drop a like if it moved you, and tell us in the comments what you know about the Tuna Club. It helps us share more forgotten stories. Back to Charles Holder and the water off Catalina. Holder's theory was simple, and it had never been tested at this scale. A large fish, given tackle matched to its strength, so will fight back on equal terms. The sport was in the contest, not the slaughter. By early 1898, he had his rod, split cane, hand-wrapped, roughly 12 feet long, and a free-spool reel loaded with 24-thread linen line, thin enough to feel every movement below, strong enough, he hoped, to hold. Jim Gardner was his boatman that morning, a quiet man who had worked Catalina waters for years. So before full light, the two of them pushed off from Avalon's dock, moving southeast along the island's lee shore where tuna ran in June. The water was flat and dark, flying fish scattering ahead of the skiff's bow. Holder trailed his line at a measured distance, the rod braced against his hip, The reel drag set just tight enough to resist. The strike came without warning. The rod buckled hard to the right, the drag screamed, and the line went taut like a cable. Whatever had taken the bait was not stopping. Oh, it was not turning. Gardner put his oars in and pulled hard, trying to slow the boat as the fish towed them south. It did not work. They were moving at 4 knots, dragged by something alive and entirely indifferent to them. Holder could not stand. He sat braced against the stern thwart, both hands on the cork grip, the line cutting salt water at an angle that changed every few seconds. 20 minutes in, the fish was still full strength. An hour passed. The island had dropped behind them, and the water deepened beneath the skiff to a cold purple gray, and the tuna was running at irregular depths, sometimes throwing its whole body into the air before sounding again. Holder's arms burned. The rod tip trembled with continuous pull, a weight that moved like a wall. He did not let go. He had been preparing for this for 2 years, and the linen line had not broken yet. 2 hours in, they had been towed more than 6 miles from where the strike began. Gardner bailed water that had come in over the gunwale during the tuna's turns. Neither man spoke except to call distances. The tuna leaped. It came out of the water 40 yards ahead, 180 pounds of silver-blue muscle clearing the surface completely. And for 1 second, Charles Holder saw clearly what he was fighting. He had never seen anything like it. Not in any ocean. The fish crashed back into the water. The line went electric again through every guide on the rod, and the fight began a 3rd time from the beginning. 3 hours. The sun was high and beating flat on the Pacific. Oh, and both men had stopped thinking about anything but the line, its angle, its tension, and the slow, exhausted work of gaining back what the fish had taken. Then, gradually, it slowed. The great runs shortened. The intervals between them grew longer, and Holder began to feel the weight differently, not as force pulling away, but as mass settling downward. The fish was tiring. He pumped the rod, short, careful lifts, gaining inches, and slowly the fish came up. So after 3 hours and 45 minutes, the bluefin broke the surface beside the skiff and stopped fighting. It was over. Gardner reached over the gunwale with the gaff, one clean stroke. The fish came in, 183 pounds. They had been towed more than 10 miles from Avalon before it was done. Holder sat with the fish across the stern. He did not stand immediately. His hands were shaking. The rod, the reel, 24 threads of linen line they had held. But the theory was no longer a theory. Back at the Avalon dock, the catch was weighed, photographed, and recorded. Holder and Gardner stood with the fish strung between them, squinting in the afternoon light. Within hours, the Associated Press had telegraphed the news across the country. The story ran in newspapers from New York to London. A man had taken a 183-pound leaping tuna on rod and reel alone. So no one had documented such a catch before. Sportsmen across the country had the same question: how? Holder's response was not to write a book. It was to write a rule book. On June 15, 1898, just 14 days after the catch, he and a group of like-minded anglers formally established the Tuna Club of Avalon. The rules were precise and radical for their time. No handlines, only rod and reel. Tackle must match the fish's size. One gaff man only, no exceptions. Plus, these were not suggestions. They were the conditions of membership. Line was to be linen only, 24 thread, testing roughly 72 pounds. Light enough to make the fight honest, not so light as to make it cruel. The fish deserved the chance to win. That was the point. The Tuna Club created a system of buttons for significant catches, a blue for tuna over 100 pounds, a silver for albacore. The records were kept with scientific seriousness, because to Holder, that was exactly what they were. Word spread quickly. Theodore Roosevelt, then governor of New York, became an honorary member in the club's founding year. So did former President Grover Cleveland and author Henry Van Dyke. The club had a reach that matched its ambition. Over the next decades, the membership list read like a census of American celebrity. Zane Grey, George Patton, Cecil B. DeMille, Charlie Chaplin, Bing Crosby. Oh, every one of them came to Catalina to fish by Holder's rules. Winston Churchill visited in 1929 and caught a 125-pound striped marlin off the island's west end. By the club's rules, he had to earn it alone. Rod, reel, and nothing else. He did, and the record held. Beyond the celebrity names, the Tuna Club did something more lasting. So it established a conservation ethic at a time when American coastal waters were being emptied by commercial handliners who took everything they could reach. Holder was president of the Wildlife Protective League of California and vice president of the Audubon Society. He wrote publicly about protecting the ocean before the language for it had even been invented. He was very early. The first documented rod and reel striped marlin came from Catalina waters in 1903, and the first broadbill swordfish on light tackle followed in 1913. Both catches came from Tuna Club members fishing by Holder's rules. The island was the laboratory. Zane Grey was among the most devoted members. He fished Catalina obsessively through the 1910s and 1920s, writing about the Pacific tuna grounds in books that brought the sport to millions who had never held a saltwater rod. The Tuna Club's wooden two-story clubhouse still stands on the Avalon waterfront, and it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Inside, Holder's original split-cane rod is mounted on the wall, the same one used on June 1st, 1898. The rules Holder wrote in 1898 became the foundation of the sport's globally accepted principles, the basis for line class records, catch and release ethics, and the entire structure of regulated competitive game fishing around the world. In 1998, a full century after his catch, Holder was inducted into the International Game Fish Association Hall of Fame. So the Tuna Club was already 100 years old, still admitting members by the standards he had written. There is something worth sitting with for a moment. A man was sent west by a disease, not by ambition. He did not choose California. He did not choose Catalina. The White Plague chose them both for him. Mexico was the plan. California was the detour, but the detour produced the world's oldest sport fishing club. The first rules for fair play between angler and fish, and a standard still followed on every ocean today. Charles Frederick Holder died in Pasadena in October 1915. He had long since stopped fishing, but the water he changed never went quiet. Somewhere off the lee shore of Santa Catalina Island, the tuna were still running. The Tuna Club still stands in Avalon. Its doors are still locked to the public. Its standards still hold. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these histories and the men who lived them. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from.